called from the kitchen, casual as anything, like she was asking me what I wanted for dinner. I think I need some time, Artie, just a few days, to clear my head. I was in the den, half watching the evening news, half reading a magazine I'd already read twice. 63 years old, and that's what my evenings look like. I didn't think much of it. My wife, we'd been married 31 years. She got like that sometimes. Quiet spells. She'd go visit her sister down in Savannah, come back 3 days later with a clearer head and a box of pralines. I figured this was one of those times. Okay, I said, you want me to call Rosalind and let her know you're coming? She didn't answer right away. I'll handle it, she said. That was a Thursday. By Sunday, she still wasn't back. No pralines. No call from Rosalind asking how I was doing the way Rosalind always does. I called my wife's cell phone twice. Both times it went a voicemail. I told myself she needed the space, like she'd said. I told myself I was being that husband who trusts his wife. I made myself a sandwich, watched a game I didn't care about, and went to bed. Monday morning, I called Rosalind myself. Artie, she said, and I could hear something careful in her voice. She's not here. What do you mean she's not there? I mean she hasn't been here. I haven't talked to her in 2 weeks. I sat down on the edge of the bed. The room felt different suddenly, like the air pressure had changed. Did something happen between you two? I asked. No, Rosalind said. Nothing. Artie, is she okay? I told her I was sure everything was fine. I hung up and I sat there for a long time. That's the moment, right there. That's where everything split into before and after. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. My wife is not a dramatic person. She doesn't disappear. She doesn't lie to me, or at least I had 31 years of evidence that she didn't. When she said she needed space, I believed her because that's who she is to me. That's who she had always been. So when I found out she wasn't at her sister's, my first thought wasn't betrayal. My first thought was fear. Something's wrong. Someone's done something to her. I was reaching for my phone to call the police when it buzzed in my hand. A text from her. I'm safe. I just need more time. Please don't look for me. Please don't look for me. I read it 4 times. Then I did the only thing a man with a home office and a 2-year-old security system does when he doesn't know what else to do. I went and looked at the footage. I'd had the system installed after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. Nothing fancy. A few cameras covering the front door, the garage, the back patio, and one inside covering my home office, because that's where I keep the filing cabinet with our financial records, our will, all of it. My son had set it up. I'd never actually gone back to look at old footage. Didn't know how, really. Took me 20 minutes to figure out the app on my laptop, calling my son twice for help, pretending I was checking something for insurance purposes. I went back to the Tuesday before she left. The week had been ordinary. She came and went, brought in the mail, fed the dog. Then Wednesday afternoon around 2 p.m. while I was out getting my truck looked at, the doorbell rang. I watched her open the front door. A man was standing there, 50s maybe, heavy-set, gray jacket, kind of face you wouldn't remember if you passed him on the street. He was holding a manila envelope. She stepped back from the door, not dramatically, not like in the movies, just one step back, like something had knocked the air out of her. I turned up the volume. The camera audio isn't perfect, but if you're patient and the house is quiet, you can make out words. He said her name. Then he said something about photographs. Then he said a number, a dollar amount. I won't say what it was, but it was large enough that I felt cold hearing it. She said quietly, "You can't do this." He said quietly, "You can't do this." He said, "I already am." She asked him to leave. He said she had 2 weeks. He put the envelope on the porch railing and walked back to a dark blue sedan parked at the curb. I watched him drive away. I watched my wife stand in the doorway for almost 3 full minutes, staring at that envelope. Then she picked it up, went inside, and I watched her sit down at the kitchen table and put her face in her hands. I paused the video. My heart was going the way it does when something's genuinely wrong. Not fast, but hard, like it's trying to get my attention. My wife was being blackmailed. I needed a minute. I got up, poured myself a glass of water, stood at the kitchen sink, and looked out at the backyard. The old maple we'd planted when our son was born, the bird feeder she fills every Sunday, the life we'd built in that house over 23 years of living in it, and I thought she didn't come to me. That's the thing that sat in my chest like a stone, not the blackmail that I could deal with. But she hadn't come to me. She'd decided on her own that whatever this man had over her was worse than telling me. She packed a bag and left instead of sitting down across from me at that kitchen table and saying, "Artie, something happened and I need your help. I was hurt. I want to be honest about that." I stood at that kitchen sink and I was genuinely deeply hurt. But I also know my wife, and I know this. She does not scare easily. Whatever was in that envelope had scared her enough to leave her home, her dog, her husband of 31 years, rather than face it. That told me something about how serious this was. So I put my hurt feelings in my back pocket because they weren't useful right now, and I went back to the laptop. I found the envelope. She hadn't thrown it away. That surprised me. But then again, my wife is practical. She keeps things. I found it in her desk drawer under a stack of old birthday cards. The way she keeps things she doesn't know what to do with. Inside were photographs, printed on regular paper like someone had done it at home. I won't describe them in detail. What I'll say is this: they were from before we met. She looked young. She was in a situation that clearly wasn't one she'd chosen freely. I sat down slowly. The man in the photographs, not the man from the doorbell camera. A different man. I didn't recognize him, but the look on my wife's face told me everything I needed to know about what had happened to her. I'd seen photographs of her from her 20s before. She smiled big in photographs. She always had. She wasn't smiling in these. I put the photos back in the envelope. I went and sat in my chair in the den for a long time. The dog came and put his head on my knee. I thought about the man at the door, the envelope, the number he'd said. I thought about my wife, 23 years old, or however young she'd been, and what she'd had to survive before she ever knew me. I thought about 31 years, the way she always knows when I'm bothered before I say anything. The way she saved up and bought me a woodworking bench for my 55th birthday because I'd mentioned offhand once that I'd always wanted to make furniture when I retired. The way she laughs at her own jokes before she finishes telling them. I thought, whoever this man is, he's not taking any of that. I called my son first. He's 32, works in IT security, not law enforcement, but he knows his way around digital information. I didn't tell him everything. I told him I needed help tracing a vehicle registration from a partial plate number and that it was important. He said, "Dad, is everything okay?" I said, "It will be." He came over that evening. Between his skills and a retired friend of mine named, well, I'll just call him my old buddy from my county clerk days because he still has friends in the right places. We had a name by the next morning. Fowler Briggs. Not from around here. He lived about 2 states over, ran some kind of consulting business that, when my son looked into it, had almost no web presence, no reviews, no real existence anyone could verify. The kind of business that's a front for something else. My son found something else too. A forum post buried from 3 years ago. A woman describing almost exactly what had happened to my wife. A man showing up at her door, photographs from her past, a demand, a deadline. The post had been deleted, but my son found it cached somewhere. The woman hadn't left her name, but the details were specific enough that they stuck with me. She hadn't been the only one. Fowler Briggs hadn't come up with this scheme for my wife. He'd done it before, maybe many times. I didn't tell my wife any of this yet. She was still wherever she was, texting me every day or two. "I'm okay, I just need more time." and I was responding calmly, "Take the time you need, I love you," which was true. And also, I was building a file. I contacted an attorney, not a divorce attorney, which is what she probably thought I'd do given how we'd left things, a criminal attorney, recommended by my old college roommate, one of the best in the region for fraud and extortion cases. I sat in his office and laid out everything I had: the camera footage, the envelope, the partial plate, Fowler Briggs's name, the cached forum post. He leaned back in his chair and looked at me over his glasses. "You did all this yourself," he said. "My son helped. How long have you been married?" 31 years. He nodded slowly, the way a man nods when he's thinking about his own marriage. "Let me make some calls," he said. "What came out over the next 2 weeks I'll tell you as plainly as I can." Fowler Briggs had been doing this for at least 7 years. He had a method. He'd find women with something in their past. Photographs, old relationships, situations they'd survived and moved on from, and he'd approach them quietly, privately, with demands. He targeted women who were now married, established, who had something to lose. He knew they'd be ashamed. He knew they'd be afraid. He counted on them not telling their husbands. He'd done it to at least 4 other women that investigators were able to identify. Maybe more who never came forward. My attorney, working with a federal investigator who'd already been looking into a related fraud case, built a case around the extortion pattern. They had enough without my wife needing to be the central witness. But she would need to make a statement. That was the call I was dreading. I sat down at the kitchen table, our kitchen table in our house, and I called her. She answered on the second ring. "Artie." Her voice was careful, the voice of someone who's been bracing for something. "I need you to come home," I said. Silence. "I know about Fowler Briggs," I said. "I know what he had in that envelope. I know what happened to you before we met. And I need you to listen to me very carefully, because I mean every word of this." I heard her breathing. "None of that changes a single thing about who you are to me. Not one thing. But there are investigators who need your statement, and there are other women he's done this to, and you coming home and telling the truth is how we stop him from doing it to anyone else." She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "You're not angry." And here's what I told her. I told her I was angry, but not at her. I told her I understood, without her having to explain it, why she hadn't come to me first. She'd spent however many years keeping that part of her life locked away, and when someone threatened to blow the lock open, her instinct was to run, not to drag me into it. I understood that, but I also told her that was over now. That whatever she'd been carrying alone, she didn't have to carry alone anymore. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm in Chattanooga." "I know," I said. I didn't know, but I said it anyway because I wanted her to feel found, not cornered. She came home that afternoon. I won't tell you it was easy after that. It wasn't. She sat with our attorney for 3 hours and gave her statement, and I watched her have to go through it, describing what had happened to her before we met, describing the man at the door, describing the weeks of fear she'd been carrying alone, and I had to hold myself very still and just be present for that, because that's what she needed, not my reaction. That night, after everyone had left, we sat on the back porch and she told me the whole story. Not the legal version. Her version. She'd been 24. She'd been in a bad situation, a relationship that wasn't safe, with a man who had documented things without her knowledge or consent. She'd gotten out. She'd rebuilt. She'd met me 3 years later, and by then she put it so far behind her she'd told herself it was buried. Fowler Briggs had somehow found the photographs and found her. "I was so ashamed," she said. "Of what?" I said. "Of surviving something." She looked at me. "I spent 31 years with you," I said. "I know who you are. I knew the minute I saw you come through the door. Whatever happened to you before that door, that's not who you are. That's what happened to you. There's a difference." She was quiet for a while. The night was warm the way nights get in early summer out here, with the fireflies just starting to come out at the edges of the yard. "I should have told you," she said. "Yeah," I said, "you should have." We sat with that for a minute. "But you're here," I said, "and I'm here. And that's what we've got." Fowler Briggs was arrested 6 weeks after that. Federal extortion charges across state lines, multiple victims. He had records, everything he'd accumulated on these women, going back years. 4 women came forward officially. My attorney told me there may have been more who chose not to. He pled guilty rather than go to trial. Sentenced to 14 years in federal prison. He'll be in his 70s when he gets out, if he gets out. I won't pretend that felt like enough. But it was something. Here's what I want to say. For anyone listening to this who's in a marriage, long or short, new or old, I knew my wife. After 31 years, I knew how she laughed and how she got quiet and how she carried things alone when she thought she was protecting someone she loved. I knew that when she said she needed space, something was wrong because she doesn't ask for space. She talks things through. That instinct, that knowledge of her is what made me look at the camera instead of just waiting by the phone. Know your person, not the idea of them, the actual person, the way they move through trouble, the things they reach for when they're scared. And if you're the one carrying something alone right now, if you're the one who's packed a bag or sent the "don't look for me" text, I want you to hear this. Your person deserves the chance to show up for you. You might be surprised by what they can handle. 31 years ago, I made a promise to a woman I was just starting to know. The promise was simple. I'm here in the hard parts, not just the easy ones. I meant it then. I mean it now. The fireflies came out while we were sitting on that porch. The dogs settled between our chairs. My wife reached over and put her hand on my arm, the way she does. We stayed there until it was dark. That's the marriage I was fighting for. Not the memory of it, not the idea of it. The real thing, still right here. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened. Not obsessively, I'm past that. But the way you think about something when it's finally settled, when the dust is down and you're sitting on your back porch watching fireflies and you can afford to look at it clearly, the thing about Fowler Briggs is that his whole operation depended on one thing: silence. That's it. That's the entire mechanism. He found women who were carrying something painful and private, and he bet, correctly most of the time, that the shame of it would be stronger than anything else. Stronger than their instinct to fight back, stronger than their trust in the people who loved them. He didn't need force, he just needed fear to do the work for him. And it did. For years, apparently, it did. What I keep coming back to is this: the women he targeted weren't weak. My wife is one of the least weak people I have ever known in 63 years of living. She survived something terrible before she was 25, rebuilt herself completely, built a whole life. That is not a weak person. But shame has a way of reaching people that has nothing to do with strength. It finds the part of you that's still 24 years old and scared, and it talks directly to that part. It bypasses everything you've become. The only answer to that, and I didn't know this before all of this happened, I'm telling you honestly, the only answer is somebody who knows you well enough to reach back, to say, "I see what you've built. I know who you are now." The 24-year-old version of you doesn't have to face this alone, because the 63-year-old version of me is standing right here. That's not something you build in a moment. That's 31 years of small things. Paying attention. Knowing how she gets quiet when something's wrong. Knowing that when she said, "I need space," she meant something else entirely. That knowledge is what made me look at the camera. Not bravery, not cleverness. Just 31 years of knowing one person really well. And on her side, this took me longer to understand, and I want to be fair about it. She was trying to protect me. That's what she said, and I believe her. She thought if she handled it quietly, if she just disappeared for a while and figured it out alone, I'd be spared. What she hadn't counted on was that I didn't want to be spared. I wanted to be her husband. There's a difference. The lesson Fowler-Briggs taught me without meaning to is that the people who count on silence to control others are always eventually defeated by honesty. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually. He had 4 identified victims. At least one of them, my wife, had a husband who paid attention. That was enough to start unraveling the whole thing. What I'd say to anyone carrying something alone right now, and I mean this simply without any pretense, is that the weight doesn't have to be distributed perfectly. You don't have to explain everything perfectly. You just have to let one person in. One person who knows you. That act alone changes the math entirely. I'm 63 years old. I've made furniture in my garage, raised a son, paid a mortgage, buried both my parents, and watched 31 years of my life be shared with a woman I am still genuinely grateful to know. None of that was easy. All of it was worth it. The fireflies still come out every summer. The dog still puts his head on my knee. My wife still laughs at her own jokes before she finishes telling them. That's what we were fighting for, and that's what we kept.